This is AJ with Effect Radio, and I'm excited to bring to you another artist that you may or may not know of. His song, From the Womb of the Morning, long title there, and I always share the verse Psalms 110, verse 3, when I introduce that song. But he had a new album release at Christmas and a book, and he is also a pastor. He wears many hats as a songwriter, recording artist. And I want to welcome Ronnie Martin.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. Let's discuss a little bit of your most, I know Christmas is past, but I want to discuss a little bit about your album that came out that I absolutely loved. It was a very unique sound. We added a lot of the different songs to our kind of last minute Christmas list, and it was titled Bells Merrily. Plus, you had a book come out around Christmas too, the 25 Advent book. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, well, gosh, I love Christmas so much, and so I love Christmas music, and I love writing Christmas music. So, the Advent book, that had been completed about a year or so ago, because that's the way these release schedules work these days. And so that was coming out, and earlier in 2022, I talked to the label and I said, what would it, how would you guys feel about a new Christmas album of all originals? And I have these songs and I'd love to record them. And so we'd have this book coming out and an album coming out, which the two things are not exactly, in sync with each other necessarily. But it was just really fun to have two, Christmas releases coming out again because I love Christmas so much, and it was a fun opportunity to be able to release both of those for sure.
Well, we really enjoyed the music because we're the same. We enjoy fresh music. There's nothing wrong with the traditional Christmas music, but as a radio station, you always want to provide listeners with something new. So it was very refreshing to hear your album. So I just want to say thank you for that.
Mm. Thanks so much. I really appreciate that.
Yeah. Back to, I want to kind of do, this is a little bit of a throwback. The Effect Radio has been around for a while, and I just came to realize when we discovered you last year that you were part of Joy Electric, and Joy Electric is still heard here on The Effect. We have Throwback Thursdays, we have a couple of Joy Electric throughout the throwback days. Can you tell me a little bit about your style of music for our listeners that might not be like, what do you define your style of music?
Yeah, gosh, it's really at the end of the day, it's electronic pop music, and what I try to do with it is I take analog synthesizers, which are these old school synthesizers, and what I do is I take those instruments and I just compose all of the music from those instruments. And so that's what kind of gives it a little bit of that unique sound. And just it's just an interest of mine. I'm really a songwriter at heart, but I also like the sound of old synthesizers. So to combine those two things and to make music from that, I've been doing it for almost 30 years, and so it's kind of a thing. It's kind of a craft, and it's something that as you work on, you just get better at it, and like anything else, you learn to perfect it as you go along. So that's kind of what it is for me, and I really enjoy it. I love it. It's a little bit unique, and it kind of gives it its own flavor and its own sound, and that's one of the appeals of it for me for sure. Yeah.
So I want to ask you about your most, well, before the Christmas album, that most solo album, most recent. It's a very long title, so I have it wrote down here. From the womb of the morning, the dew of your youth will be yours. I think I got it all on there. What was your creative
Got it.
process like for that album?
Well, it's interesting because I wrote it during 2020, so that's obviously was the height of COVID, and my busy schedule kind of opened up a little bit, like it did for a lot of people, because there was a lot of things I couldn't do. And so I'd been wanting to make a solo album. With Joy Electric, I always made the records myself, so in a sense they were solo albums. But I wanted to make a record with just my name on it, and so 2020 just provided a really good opportunity. After I'd written all the songs, I was able to find some downtime to get into the studio where I'm sitting right here, and actually record it, and then and just you know just finally kind of enter back into just something that I love to do, which is so much a part of who I am, which is making records and writing songs. So the opportunity with Velvet Blue Music came up. They wanted to release it, and so it just kind of got me back in the studio and spurred me on, and it's been great. It's been a really fun process. So
So to spin off of that, how did you come up? What made you choose? Because it's out of the Bible. It's out of Psalm 110, verse 3. What caused you to use that for the album title?
yeah, well, that's a great question. I really love the Psalms. The Psalms are a part of my daily devotional life, and when you read the Psalms and you get really familiar with them, you find that they're just incredibly poetic. And there's parts of the Psalms that are incredibly abstract. So I really like abstract lyrics. I like abstract art. And so one of the things that I've always attempted to do in my music is to write very simple, uh, memorable, catchy pop melodies, but to marry those things with kind of abstract poetic lyrics. And so what I did was I took a page from the Psalms, and I basically did like an abstract kind of poetic rendering of some of the Psalms. And you can see that that's featured all the way through the album. So it's kind of being inspired by the Psalms and taking just sort of an inspiration from sort of the lyrical sensibilities of the Psalms, but making my own thing out of it. And so that was the gist behind the record.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think it causes our listeners to search out things too, because such an odd title like the single that you released, From the Womb of the Morning, and it just causes listeners to be like, well, what does that mean? And then they look into it more. So it's very fun for us too to have such unique titles that cause us to give a backstory to the song. So I appreciate you explaining that a little more for our listeners. Speaking of inspiration, which music groups inspired you?
Well, gosh, so I'm an 80s guy. I'm an 80s kid. I grew up in the 80s. So there's going to be a lot of groups from that era that inspired me. So I think, given the kind of music I do, it was definitely it's definitely been bands like Kraftwerk and New Order, and even some of the old Christian artists from that era. So I grew up listening to Keith Green and Daniel Amos, and just really great songwriters, really creative musicians have always been a big inspiration to me. But yeah, you're going to see a lot of that probably come from the 70s and the 80s, because I'm getting older, so those were my eras, and so I draw a lot of inspiration from that time.
Yeah, those are some great artists. We actually are throwbacks. We go way back to Daniel Amos, Larry Norman, and those days. And I can definitely tell when artists have been influenced by those older artists. That's why I had to ask for myself too, because I was like, I bet he's been inspired by some older artists out there.
Oh, 100%. And Daniel Amos was just a massive inspiration, way, way, way back in the day. I mean, they were, and that's really where I just really got a love for more abstract lyrics and things that make, lyrics that make you think and they're not so obvious. And he was really, he really championed that, especially in the gospel music industry. And so, yeah, big influence from them for sure.
So I have to ask this. What was your first experience with music? Because I know your brother also does Starflyer 59. What was it like? Did you grow up in a musical household? Was it something that you guys just thought yourselves, or how did that happen?
Yeah, my parents loved music. So for my dad, he was kind of old school. He loved all the big band stuff. He loved all the old crooners. So we would grow up driving with him, and it was all, Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin and Bing Crosby and those guys. And then my mom was a little more, her thing would have been a little more listening to modern music, and she liked the radio. And so I remember, we would drive in this big, Ford Econoline 12 passenger van. Mom is driving me, my brother, my sister, all over the place. And the whole time, she's playing just all kinds of different music. So I think both my parents love music. They didn't play instruments, and yet they got us into taking piano lessons at an early age, which then led down, down the road of learning guitar and drums and all the things that my brother and I ended up doing. So, but they were the ones. It was really my mom, I think, that introduced us to kind of new modern pop music and things of that nature, which I think is what gave us the inspiration to kind of do what we're doing.
So, what is a best way for our listeners to connect with you, find your music, and about your book that you came out with?
Yeah, so I got a website. It's ronniemartin.org, and it has all the information uh, that you'd want on there for how to buy all the different books and albums, and then if you want to contact me for any reason, all the info's up there, so it should be pretty simple.
Okay, perfect. So, to close this out, what is one message you would want to leave with our listeners?
Well, I think we're living in a world where it's very easy to lose hope right now. I think when you look at the state of the world that we're living in, and I think the only message that's really worth much is that there's hope in Christ. And the gospel is a message of hope, the good news of Jesus. We find forgiveness, we find life if we put our trust in him. And that is the hope that doesn't collapse. It's the hope that doesn't fail. It's the hope that has a future. And so that undergirds really everything that I do. So
All right, thank you so much, Ronnie. Again, you were tuned in to an interview with Ronnie Martin from Joy Electric discussing his album that is a very long title, From the Womb of the Morning, the Dew of Your Youth Will Be Yours. Thank you again so much, Ronnie, for your time. Appreciate you and your music.
thanks so much. Thanks for having me. I'm really grateful.
Thank you.